Hey, what's up everyone? This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, but I wanted to debunk the whole thing about Luke Skywalker being a Gary Stew. Now, a lot of Disney Star Wars defenders will try to defend Rey by claiming that, oh, Luke did all this stuff too, see, he's a Gary Stew, to try to deflect the argument of Rey being a Mary Sue. And of course, I want to debunk that. So one of the biggest misconceptions about what a Mary Sue and a Gary Stew is, oh, overpowered. No, there's much more to that than just being overpowered. So, a Mary Sue and a Gary Stew in a nutshell is a type of character who is depicted as unrealistically lacking in flaws or weaknesses. Let's examine Luke Skywalker to see if this is true. So, if Luke Skywalker was a Gary Stew, he'd be lacking any weaknesses. Well, what about the time he was attacked by the Wampa? If he was a Gary Stew, he would have been able to sense the Wampa coming with the Force. But no, he didn't. Instead, he got attacked and failed because he was still relatively inexperienced. So he can't be a Gary Stew in this situation. What about Luke Skywalker's failure to levitate the X-Wing? He was unable to do it because of his weakness he had of being young and impatient. He wanted it now. If Luke Skywalker had spent maybe an hour in really deep meditation gathering the Force, he probably would have been able to somewhat get it out. But Luke was impatient and flawed, so he failed to do it. Another thing, he would have been able to deal with Cornelius, Evazan, and Ponda Baba with no problem. He wouldn't have needed it. And another trait, which I'll get to in a moment. In fact, I'll get to it now. Another trait that a lot of Mary Sues and Gary Stew have is they're instantly liked by everybody. What did Cornelius Evazan say about Ponda Baba? He doesn't like you. So he wasn't instantly liked. Same thing with Han Solo. Han Solo did not instantly like Luke Skywalker. It took a while for them to become friends. It took a while to build that trust between them. Another thing that a lot of people will try to bring up to say he's a Gary Stew is that how Luke Skywalker supposedly just deflected the training remote so easily. Well, if you pay attention to the dialogue of A New Hope, Obi-Wan says, you better get on with your exercises, not you better start your exercises. So it was implied that Obi-Wan was teaching him some things before this scene as they were going to Alderaan. So he wasn't just doing it on a whim with no training. People will also try to bring up the whole, oh, Luke Skywalker shot the torpedoes into the Death Star using the Force with no training, which that's not true either. Let's go back to the training remote scene. Okay, so what Luke Skywalker did to help him shoot the proton torpedoes in was he basically had the Force tell him and guide him to tell him, oh, do it now. He didn't do that with no training. Luke Skywalker was just using the same exact skill he had learned with the training remote, which was to use the Force to anticipate and tell him when to deflect the attacks, the higher reflexes. So he was just using the training that he was already given by Obi-Wan Kenobi to allow him to do that. And not to mention, the ability to use the Force to give you enhanced reflexes and better reaction times, that's like the most basic, bare bones Force ability. So it's not really anything that difficult to master. What else? Another thing people try to bring up is how, oh, he supposedly used telekinesis to force pull his lightsaber with quote-unquote no training. Let's think for a minute. Empire Strikes Back takes place 3 years after A New Hope. Is it that hard to imagine that Luke Skywalker, maybe in between missions in those years, could have experimented with the Force on his own? Or discovered stuff to help him? I mean, we don't give me that excuse that we didn't see that in the movies. Because common sense and logic tells me that's something Luke might do. Another thing they'll bring up is Luke Skywalker supposedly beating Darth Vader with little to no training with the lightsaber. And they say, oh, the only time we saw him train was in A New Hope. Well, again, at this point, Luke Skywalker had been training as a Jedi for 4 years. So he would have time to train on his own in between missions, fighting the Empire. And not to mention, experience practicing with the lightsaber and using it against stormtroopers. And again, it's not hard to imagine Luke Skywalker doing that. If you can't imagine him doing that, you don't really have any imagination. I'm sorry. Compare this all to Rey. She was doing a lot more super advanced abilities with like no training at all. Like the Jedi mind trick is not comparable to Luke Skywalker using the most basic ability of faster reflexes with the Force. Like she literally had barely heard of the Force before that. And Luke Skywalker retrieving his lightsaber and struggling to do that is not comparable to Rey lifting, dozens and dozens of boulders weighing probably tons. So yeah, this was... Oh, alright people, just tell me what you think of the video, and give me a like, a comment, or subscribe, and I will see you people around.